Good afternoon and welcome to today's Crossing Borders broadcast, the IMC streaming service created to keep us all connected during these difficult times. My name is Bruno Lecuyer. If you don't already know me, I'm the IMC Chief Executive, and I'm super excited to be hosting this session based on the beautiful island of Grenada. So before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping as usual. I want to firstly thank today's sponsors. That's Range Developments in Dubai. If you've not seen one of our broadcasts, don't worry, you can catch all of them on the catch-up service. They're all published on our YouTube channel, so you just need to search for Investment Migration Council, and if you press subscribe, then you'll get updates when a new video is posted. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. So remember, you can ask questions and make comments to the panelists. Today, you just use the GoToWebinar widget, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. You'll also find some useful handouts. Today's session is focused on the Six Senses resorts and the Grenada CBI program, which has an E2 treaty with the United States. So there's information about the Six Senses resort in the widgets. So as ever, we try and keep everybody connected and of course engaged. So we'll have a couple of polls. I'm going to kick one off now, and we just really want to know, where are you guys seeing us today? Where are you from? So if you can just give you a few seconds to answer that. Okay, we've got about 80% of votes. I'll give it 5 more seconds. Okay, gonna close that and share the results. All right, so 33% in Europe and Africa, 28% from the Americas, 22% from Asia Pacific, and 17% from the Middle East. So that's really good for us to know. So also there's a short video at the end of today's broadcast about the IMC Education and Training certification. If you don't know anything about that certificate, then hang around till the end and you'll see a 45-second video which will let you know what that is all about. Okay, so during today's broadcast, we'll be discussing Grenada's Citizenship by Investment program, some of the benefits that it has to offer, do a bit of competitive analysis over the other programs in the Caribbean, and of course we'll talk a little bit about the E2 visa route, which is the route to residency in the United States, and how all this comes together is where it will get interesting. So without any further ado, I want to welcome our speakers, or rather our speaker, and that's Mr. Mohammed Asaria, who's the co-founder and managing director of Range Developments, who's based out of Dubai. We are hopeful to have Mr. Percival Cluden, who's the CEO of the Grenadian CBI unit, but I'm told that he got a wake-up call from the Prime Minister about 35-40 minutes ago and is still in conference. So we hope that Percival will be able to join us as we move along today's broadcast. So remember, if you've got any questions or comments, please use the widgets and ask those to Mohammed or even myself. So Mohammed, good afternoon, because I know you're in Dubai, and a warm welcome to today's Crossing Borders, the IMC streaming service. How are things in Dubai, first of all? We were talking just before we started the broadcast, and things seem to be easing for you over there.
Yeah, thank you, Bruno, and good afternoon. before we touch upon that, I've just received a message from Mr. Clouden. He sends apologies for being 10 minutes late, but unavoidable, and he'll be dialing in shortly. He's just on his way to his office from the Prime Minister's wake-up call, as you so politely put it. First of all, I think you guys at the IMC have done a tremendous job over the last immigration community connected. So thank you to you and your colleagues, Bruno, for that. And as regards Dubai, the lockdown seems to be being lifted on a day-to-day basis. So we're allowed back in our offices. Offices are permitted to function at 50%. Shopping malls are permitted to open at 30%. Some civil amenities, parks, gyms were permitted to reopen from yesterday. And thankfully, the cases seem to be on a decline. I think the government has done a fantastic job here in the UAE. There hasn't been too many concerns with regards to the capacity of the healthcare system. And we certainly haven't had any issues of hoarding of food or anything like that. So, you know, actually, I've been receiving calls from a number of high net worth individuals from far afield saying, you know, we're even interested in looking at setting up a second base in Dubai, such as being the appreciation of the way that the government have handled the crisis. So those are warming words to hear.
Good to know. Good to know. Well, let's fly over to Grenada. Just for those viewers that are not familiar, particularly with Grenada, I know we've got quite a few viewers who aren't. Give us a little bit of background as to the Grenadian program, when it came about, and where things are now, really.
Sure. So Grenada has had a citizenship program probably for about 25 years. And then in the early 2000s, it was put on pause. The government followed an alternative route of attracting foreign direct investment. The program was resurrected when the current administration was re-elected in, I think it was 2013, if I'm not mistaken. And that was my first visit to Grenada. And it has evolved in the last 6 years quite considerably since its reincarnation in 2013. And a lot of these changes, which have really catapulted Grenada's popularity as a global citizenship by investment program, took place in Q2 of 2019, which coincided with Range's invitation to develop in Grenada. Some of these changes were a realignment of price, a very generous definition of dependence, a more expeditious processing time. So Grenada has really learned from its other peers in the Caribbean, taken some of those lessons on board, both in terms of best practice, in terms of processing efficiencies, as well as some of the salient features of the program. And when combined with some of the structural advantages Grenada offers, which is a unique visa-free travel proposition to China, as well as to Schengen and to the UK and to Russia and the other 140 countries out there. Combined with the unique E2 visa access, it's really developed, I'd say, one of the leading positions globally.
All right, let's stay on that, the E2 treaty, because it is the only country in the Caribbean with a CBI program that has the possibility for Grenadians to move into the US. Can you talk to us or talk us through that? How does the E2 treaty work if you're not already a Grenadian citizen?
Well, let's take a step back, Bruno, and let's have a little bit of a history lesson. How did Grenada get lessons? Well, let me put it to you. I mean, you and me are probably similar ages. Do you remember what happened in Grenada in 1983?
Gosh, Grenada 1983. You're testing me now. I don't. Can I phone a friend?
At the end of the Cold War, Grenada was very close to the Russian Federation and the Cubans. And the Cubans were building a very long runway in Grenada, much longer than needed for a typical Airbus A3, whatever it was in those days, jet. And it was creating a lot of anxiety with the United States, given Grenada's close proximity to the United States. So Ronald Reagan turned around the Navy ships, which were actually heading to Lebanon in 1983, and they invaded the island of Grenada and for want of a better word, they described it as their liberation. As part of the reparations of war, Grenada entered into something called a Treaty of Trade and Commerce with the United States. And in that treaty is enshrined the E2 visa rights, which says if you are a Grenadian citizen, you can apply for an E2 visa. It's an over-the-counter visa issued at a consulate, and you're eligible for this visa if you make a significant investment in the United States. Significant isn't defined, but by custom, it's in excess of $150,000, which permits you, your spouse, and your children to invest and reside in the United States. These visas are issued for 5-year periods, after which they're renewed on the basis that the business which predicated your E2 visa remains in existence and remains performing. So there have been people in the United States for 30 years on E2 visas, Bruno. And it's a very interesting immigration tool. It is classified as a non-immigrant visa, which is a term of art which needs to be understood. Why? Because it's very different from permanent residency. The green card program, which I think all of you discussed last week, once you've got it, you have it, and it's converted, can be converted into citizenship. Whereas the E2 needs to be renewed. Now, that is one of the disadvantages in terms of permanent renewal. But one of the advantages, Bruno, in terms of the E2 visa, because it's a non-immigrant visa and you're not a permanent resident, you're not taxed on your worldwide income if you don't fulfill the United States substantial presence test. So we have a whole bunch of clients out there who've taken a Grenadian citizenship, applied for an E2 visa. They don't spend 122 days in the United States. Their wife and children may do so, but that ensures that the bulk of the family's assets aren't subject to the US tax regime, just the assets which are domiciled or based in the United States. So it's become a really interesting concept. Now, you might just ask me, why doesn't Mohammed sitting in Dubai apply for an E2 visa? Why does he need to jump through the hoop of getting a Grenadian citizenship first? Because the E2 visa is enshrined between countries. It's a bilateral treaty. You have to have entered into this trade, or your country has to have entered into this Treaty of Trade and Commerce with the United States before you as a citizen of that country can become eligible. And the key emerging markets, India, Vietnam, China, South Africa, Nigeria, large parts of the Middle East, Russia, clearly where people wish to migrate to the Western world and pursue the American dream. Unfortunately, none of these countries have entered into Treaty of Trades of Commerce with the United States, and hence you need to be from a forum or from a country which has a treaty, and Grenada is one of the few citizenship by investment countries out there which also provide you with this opportunity. And just to give you an idea on how popular this is, Bruno, as a visa category, not limited to Grenada, 40,000 people last year applied for an E2 visa, compared to 10,000 for an EB5. Now, I appreciate the latter, there was an artificial cap on it, but 40,000 is an incredible number. And a significant number of these emanated from Japan, Australia, and Western Europe.
I think, certainly from what I've heard in the last 2-3 years, it's become very popular with Chinese immigrants, given the backlog of nearly 20 years with the EB5. So you're seeing a good number of Chinese investors moving to the United States through Grenada and through the E2 treaty.
No, absolutely. I mean, China is a big market, Vietnam is another, India is another. So if you look at it, historically, the Chinese investors used to look at the EB5 program. And maybe until, I don't know, 7-8 years ago in China, before we hit something called retrogression under EB5, and retrogression is another nice way of saying there's a long wait. So before EB5 became retrogressed in China, it was a very popular route. It was $500,000, and within a period of 2 to 3 years, you could get your permanent residency in the United States. However, the EB5 became a victim of its own success, and as you put on, it's close to 2 decades in terms of the weight emanating from China, and certain people need to be in the United States in an expeditious manner. And really, even if you look at all the other categories of visas out there, there's very few, or if any, which provide you with an expeditious and semi-permanent basis like Grenada E2 does. The other way that the EB5 became challenged was at the end of last year, when there was a price increase. I'm sure you're familiar, the price went up from $500,000 to $1.8 million. Yes, there are certain exemptions if you invest in a targeted employment area where it's 900,000. However, to qualify as an investment in a targeted employment area, it's become harder since the introduction of the new regulations which took place in November of last year. Gerrymandering is no longer permitted, so previously central Manhattan could be classified as a targeted employment area, which now it can't. And especially in the post-COVID world, Bruno, as capital becomes scarcer, for an individual to commit $1.8 million coming from China for 20 years to an immigration strategy with a very low, if any, return is not really an attractive option. Investors are out there looking at other alternatives, and Grenada E2 has really become on the forefront of practitioners' lips. Now, I think I first heard about Grenada E2 as an option in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And the first time I heard about it, I was hesitant. I was at a conference in China, and one of the ministers of Grenada was presenting this opportunity. And, I heard it, and I really didn't pay too much attention. But fast forward 3 years, and you've now successfully seen individuals from Ho Chi Minh City move to Houston, and from Beijing to Boston, and from Mumbai to Miami. There has really been quite a considerable number of people who availed this opportunity. And, as they say, once you have a proven concept, more and more people look to replicate, especially given it's cost-effective, it's expeditious, and it has some of the tax advantages that we touched upon.
All right, I want to get to also what distinguishes the Grenada CBI offering to the other 5 countries, aside from the E2 treaty. And then I want to also talk about your organization, and why it's gone into Grenada in the last year and a half. But before we do that, we have a question. Let's talk about numbers a little bit. We have a question from Kumar in, I believe it's in India. How big is the Indian market? Has there been any assessment on that? And I know that you're not from the CBI unit, Mohammed, but I just wondered if perhaps you could answer that whilst we wait diligently for Percival to hopefully join us. So any idea of the numbers of the Indian market?
So look, I can only talk from my own experience, Bruno. And let's backtrack a little bit. I went to India probably the first time to promote CBI in 2014 with some kids. And I subsequently visited India in 2016 again with our Dominica product. And I'll introduce those when we talk more about range in our organization. And both of them didn't really have a very strong uptake in India. I visited India for the sake of completeness when we launched our Grenada proposition, not expecting much of a response. In September of 2019. I was interviewed after a panel presentation I gave at a large real estate exhibition. And, CNBC were very kind enough to describe Grenada as chart busting. It can be obtained in 3 months, the tax advantages we touched upon, and it helps people achieve the American dream. And you've got to remember, for the last 4 years in India, tens of millions of dollars have been spent by regional centers from the United States promoting the American dream. And just as India was leading up to become arguably the second largest feeder market for EB5, it hit a roadblock with the changes in regulation. So Grenada became the beneficiary of that demand and has become really a proxy for some of these investors who are looking to take the EB5, not necessarily as an alternative route. A number of individuals will go with the Grenada E2, wait for their EB5 petition to ripen, and then move to permanent residency if that's the right strategy for them. Some of them will be very satisfied remaining on the Grenada E2 route indefinitely. So that's one source of demand from India. The second source of demand from Indians is really targeting the non-resident Indian community. There have been a number of tax changes or tax changes which people expect to happen in the coming years. First of all, I've just actually literally finished a webinar where I was with one of the partners of Ernst & Young on, and there's a large discussion on inheritance tax coming into India. And remember, Bruno, no double tax treaty covers inheritance tax. Double tax treaties only cover income tax. So NRIs, which means non-resident Indians living outside India, are very concerned about this, especially if it's based on citizenship rather than residency as the trigger for any potential inheritance tax, cross-generational charges which may come in.
There's no inheritance tax in India right now. Is that what you're saying, right?
Correct. So if you want to move to India, I'm sure I can put you in touch with people. I'm joking. But if you look at it, Bruno, the other thing which is making NRIs very nervous is there's a discussion about a citizenship-based taxation. So if you read the budget which came out in February, there was a hint that Indians living outside India who didn't pay tax anywhere by virtue of their residence could be taxed or deemed to be tax resident in India. And this created an enormous uproar around the Gulf, as you can imagine. The Gulf is densely populated with very high net worth investors from high net worth individuals in India. The very next day, the finance minister of India, she had to issue a memo where she clarified or attempted to clarify and allay concerns, which said, yes, but that only applies if you're a bona fide worker. Now, nowhere in Indian tax legislation is this term bona fide worker defined. And so when people ask me, what does this mean? I say it means $2 million in legal fees before anyone's able to clarify what this definition is and whether someone one day is going to use this law to tax you when you're living outside India and maybe you're a second generation individual in the United Arab Emirates. So why not look at a second citizenship, which also provides you the ability to live in the United States, which is very popular with Indian nationals, and it takes you totally outside the remit of the Indian tax situation. You maintain your privileges to do business in India if you had an Indian passport, if you relinquish it. You get something called an Overseas Citizen of India card, which can be obtained online within a 90-day period. And the only disadvantages with an Indian citizenship is you can't stand for political office. And the second thing is you can't buy any new agricultural land, but you can maintain your existing holdings of agricultural land. So as a consequence, we've had a number of NRIs walk into our office looking to change their citizenship because they're very concerned about what may happen in the future if a citizenship-based taxation comes in. And Bruno, you also have to remember that the corollary of citizenship-based taxation is an exit tax, because no finance minister, whatever country they're in, are going to let individuals simply escape a citizenship-based taxation by obtaining a second citizenship at that time. Everyone is looking to the US. Everyone is looking at this exit-based taxation system where, if you wish to give up your US citizenship today, as you're well aware, they look at your estate and they forward value it and they charge you a percentage before you're allowed to surrender your US passport. If a citizenship-based taxation comes into India, a similar challenge will face Indian high net worth NRIs. And at that stage, it'll be a very expensive degree in hindsight to have obtained by not having the foresight to look at this opportunity before that law is enforced, if it is ever enforced.
So it's clearly rattle some cages, because there are a good number of non-resident Indians, of course, not only in the Gulf area, but quite frankly, all over the world, really. So that's really something to watch out for. Going back to Grenada, Mohammed, what are the advantages of Grenada, really, over the other citizenship by investments programs in the Caribbean? What's, for you, stands out as being, quite a striking difference, aside from the E2, which we spoke about already?
So look, Bruno, I wouldn't call it advantages or disadvantages. I would just say, you know, each country in the Caribbean, there are 5 countries, each has certain distinguishing features, and what we see from Grenada is the following 3 or 4, which identifies it. First of all, is a generous definition of dependence. You can include your siblings as part of a citizenship application. What else? You can include your young parents, your children. So it's really catering to the whole family value. That's the first one. With regards to the second one, it has very wide visa-free travel. You can travel to China. It has the ability to resell the investment after 5 years to someone else who also wants citizenship. And you know, one of the other things which really stands out as Grenada as a destination is, believe it or not, 25% of Grenada's GDP comes from offshore education. The world's largest offshore medical university is in Grenada. 1% of the world's doctors, Bruno, believe it or not, have graduated from St. George's University in Grenada. 1,000 individuals go into the US system at residency level every year, which is an incredible number for a country of 130,000 people. So it's not dependent
on the population was. I wonder, Mo, we have a poll ready. Shall we ask the viewers what their thoughts are on this as well? Let's do that. So you can see a poll in front of you. What we're asking is, what do you deem the key advantage of Grenadian citizenship by investment to be? So please select one of the choices. So widest visa-free travel, including to China, the US access via the E2 visa route, a wide definition of dependence, as Mohammed was just explaining, cost-effective price points, and then the last option is the viable real estate investment opportunities that there are on the islands. So we'll give you 5 more seconds to answer. We're still collating some responses. 75% of you have voted now. I'm just going to close that and then share the results with you. So Mohammed,
oh, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, go ahead, Mohammed, if you've got some comments.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, you can see that the 56% are looking at it as the US access via the E2. And I'm presuming our audience are professional intermediaries or professional participants in the citizenship by investment industry. So that really does distinguish Grenada. And Bruno, what I will say is that in the post-COVID era, the discussions we're having with high net worth investors today is really centered around a migration strategy, as well as an option B, as well as an insurance point in terms of second citizenship. So, you know, I think if you look at the Western world, or if you look at the more developed economies in Europe and the United States, trillions of dollars of stimulus have gone into the countries, and they will be the first to recover. And arguably, I believe a depression has been avoided. I know we will have a recession of some sorts, but we pray it's not as deep as certain commentators have hypothesized because of that stimulus. In the emerging markets, where our citizenship seekers are from, whether that's India, Nigeria, South Africa, parts of Southeast Asia, certain countries in the Middle East, that sort of tools which allow fiscal stimulus to that levels aren't available. So we're going to see currency depreciation. We're going to see potential capital controls. We're going to see higher debt to GDP ratios. We're going to see higher taxation. and we're going to see a starving of economic growth going forward. So, individuals are saying, yes, we are nervous about any political and social unrest which the COVID pandemic may occur.
Right.
We're also worried about the economic opportunities available in our home country. So we need a citizenship which provides us the ability to access a mature economy. And they're either looking at Western Europe or they're looking at the United States. Now, given some of the challenges with the EB5 that we mentioned, given some of those challenges, Grenada E2 provides them with the security from a personal perspective and an ability to restart their business or expand their business into the United States with the E2, Bruno. And also, as people are talking deglobalization in this world, the E2 provides an individual the ability to be intertwined in the fabric of society, in the market of his consumers, which is something which will be very important if you wish to continue trading with a major bloc like the United States. I'm sure you've been following the headlines of what's been happening between Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi over the last few days and, in fact, hours as it escalates.
Yeah, I think we're seeing certainly a lot of, as usual, we're coming up to the election in November, and I was chatting with Ron Klasko. We had a session yesterday on updates around the world, and he was saying, yeah, we've really got to keep an eye on what's happening because nothing is really normal in the immigration space in the US at the moment. You've got Donald Trump, he was lastly elected very much on a rhetoric on anti-immigration. And then you've got, the Democrats who are very pro-immigration. So we're going to, potentially see a lot of playing around with the immigration framework, the United States immigration framework, in the next few months. So it is really important to have a good, trusted advisor at your side who can answer all these questions. So I'm going to close this poll. No, and I want to.
I've just received a message that Mr. Clouden is with us, and I just think you need to unmute him so he can join our panel.
Terrific. Let's have a look. I've got a Margaret Wilkinson who's here.
Joining from someone else's computer.
Okay, the attendee is self-muted. So from my side,
is he come on as a panelist rather than? I mean, has he come on as attendee rather than a panelist?
No. He's there's Margaret Wilson who's come on as a panelist, which could well be Percy, but that person seems to be self-muted. So I've sent an unmute request and I've sent a webcam request as well. So let's see how we respond to that. In the meantime, Mohammed, I'm conscious of the time a little bit. Can you talk us through range developments, how range developments came into being? You're the co-founder of this global real estate developer. We know that you've got some successful real estate offerings in St. Kitts through the beautiful Park Hyatt St. Kitts, which I actually personally had the pleasure to visit last year during the course of the Citizenship by Investment conference, which I think was in June, hosted by Les Khan in St. Kitts. I didn't have the pleasure to stay there, but I certainly had a walk around the facilities, which are beautiful resorts. You've also built a resort in the Commonwealth of Dominica, and I'm just seeing that was your second, the Cabrits Resort, which is a Kempinski hotels that I think are really good quality, and now La Sagesse. So talk to us a little bit about range developments, how that's evolved in the last few years, and why Dominica? I beg your pardon, why Grenada?
So Bruno, let's rewind the clock to 2011. I was in my office one day in Dubai. We were involved in real estate development in the Middle East, and an individual walked in and he tried to encourage me to acquire citizenship of St. Kitts and Nevis. He thought I needed um, this tool, told me about the visa-free travel and how quickly it could be obtained. And quite frankly, Bruno, I thought it sounded too good to be true, and really it sounded a little bit, it just didn't sound legitimate. So I picked up the phone to the British High Commissioner and I said, you know, this is part of the Commonwealth. Can you please tell me if this whole citizenship by investment avenue is legitimate, and are you aware of it? So the British High Commissioner was kind enough to spend 45 minutes on the phone to me. I knew him through some common friends. And he assured me of the integrity of the St. Kitts scheme, and it was enshrined in statutes. And I said, wow, I mean, 2011, sitting in Dubai, you have the Arab Spring all around you, political cauldrons in each and every country, and people needed a second citizenship, not for global mobility, but their countries, the existence of their countries was questionable at that time. So off I went to St. Kitts to do some personal due diligence, met all the lawyers, met with the government, and really when I got there, I was amazed by the beauty of the island. And what really struck me was the absence of world-class resorts, like we have in the Middle East, like we have in Mauritius, and like we have in the Maldives. So I said, you know, we need to find a structure where we can marry institutional development of ultra-luxury resorts with the Citizenship by Investment program as a funding tool, because St. Kitts was still starved of capital at that stage coming out of the global financial crisis. Debt wasn't available, and as a result, very few people were able to develop resorts through citizenship or otherwise. So we worked with the government to permit a real estate trust structure where each investor acquires a unit, and together they own the resort, and that capital is pooled for common benefit, and a sustainable asset is built. And that is really how range developments originated. As you mentioned, and I appreciate your kind words about the Park Hyatt, and we look forward to welcoming you again once the pandemic lifts. That was named by CNN as the best new hotel in the Caribbean in 2017, on the Condé Nast Hot List in 2017 in its debut year. So I'm very proud of my development team, and it's, you know, it's a testament to our institutional development strategy. This isn't, you know, you hit and hope. This isn't you sell a citizenship unit and you buy some concrete. This is you commit capital to this venture, you design the hotel to the highest standards, we have execution ability, we can get as granular as needed on the construction chain, because remember, it's not Brussels or Western Europe where you have 20 contractors who are pitching for a particular job. You know, in Dominica, before we opened at the end of 2019, we had 400 direct hire, we have our own equipment, we're able to execute, and that's where we're unique, because we have the construction expertise and we have the capital raising expertise through the Citizenship by Investment program. 2015, I was called up by the government of Dominica, invited to the island of Dominica, worked with them to introduce a real estate limb into the law. Remember, Dominica has had a citizenship program since 1991, but didn't have the benefit of the real estate limb. So worked very closely with the government, started construction of the Brits Resort Kempinski in 2000, I think it was 2015 or 16, and we opened that hotel in 2019 on schedule, notwithstanding two of the worst natural disasters with Hurricane Maria and Tropical Storm Erica plaguing our construction period, but we managed to finish on time. At the end of 2018, November, I remember the day, I had a delegation from the government of Grenada visit us in Dubai, invited us to develop in Grenada, saying you're the only developer who's developed in the whole of the Caribbean. Grenada, unfortunately, has a very high unemployment rate of 29% at that time. And can we sit down and work out how we can jointly develop 2 hotels on the lovely La Sagesse site? So we were privileged to be invited to Grenada. There were a number of legislative changes which improved Grenada's standing in the citizenship program, which we touched upon. But I'm about to pen some words on this, Bruno, in the coming weeks, which I'll share with you. We chose Six Senses as a brand not by accident, because it's the right brand for the Caribbean and it's the right brand for Grenada at this time. It's a boutique hotel, so we'll be building 100 rooms on La Sagesse, and by fortune more than anything else, it's perfectly designed for the traveler in the post-corona landscape. We have 100 rooms built over 24 acres. There's only a 20% build-up area. It's as low density as you're going to get. There's no corridors. It can be a one-way passage of traffic through the villas. The pathways are 3 meters wide. Social distancing, there was planned to be 3 meters of space in the restaurants in any case. 39 swimming pools, and a mile of actually 2 beaches on the site. So if you look at it, for someone who's looking for a luxury traveler who's looking for a vacation at the moment, he's not going to get anything like this in the Caribbean in terms of a low density holiday resort. So that's just a few words about us, and we focus on execution first. We make sure our project is executable before we go out and raise capital through the citizenship by investment privilege that we're granted by the relevant country, because that's why investors trust us.
We've had a couple of questions coming through, Mohammed. First is, when do you expect the La Sagesse Resort Six Senses to open, please?
So end of 22 or early 23, and it depends really when we can get back on site on full throttle. So hopefully in the next few weeks we'll be able to determine that.
Okay. What's the offering price point wise for a unit at Six Senses?
So it's an investment in a real estate trust structure of $220,000, which is a prescribed minimum per statute, and then there's some additional government fees based on how many family members there are within the family unit.
All right. And we've had another question on range, is what distinguishes range developments with other developers in the Caribbean islands where you have developments and where there are other developments? So what makes Six Senses, Kempinski and Park Hyatt through range different to the other offerings that there are?
Well, look, I think fundamentally it's the fact that we've delivered, and it's not just once. You mentioned 3 of the world's leading hotel brands in your last sentence, and we're privileged we've partnered with them, and we've delivered to the highest quality. And nothing makes me happier to hear our guest experience, and you being one of them when you visited the Park Hyatt. I put the question back to you: was there anything on the island of St. Kitts which even merely compared to the luxury and the offering that you had whilst you were at the Park Hyatt? I wish you could have stayed with us. But we'll have the privilege of doing the same in Grenada. And it's really that execution, that proven execution, which sets us apart. As I will say, and I say it many times, Bruno, past performance isn't an indicator of, or isn't a guarantee of future success. But hey, in this world, there's not much else which you can hang your hat on apart from what you have done. And people ask you for your profile before they hypothecate about your ability to deliver in the future. So there's been an awful lot of hard work in the last 7 or 8 years, which have gone into making us what we claim is, the largest and most successful developer in the Caribbean. And I think I can see Mr. Clouden is on the panelist now. I don't know if you want to let him have a few parting words.
Absolutely. We've been trying. I know they've got some technical problems in Grenada. I've sent an unmute request and a camera request a number of times. I don't know if Mr. Clouden, can you hear us, Mr. Clouden?
Maybe you'll have to arrange your next conference in Grenada, Bruno, after the pandemic lifts, so we can all see the beauty of the island and hear from Mr. Clouden in person.
And I've sent messages as well through the system, but no response, unfortunately. And yes, we would love to organize an IMC workshop in the Caribbean. I wonder, do you have conference facilities planned in La Sagesse?
So yes, we will. There will, but remember, it's only 100 rooms. So I know you have thousands of members, so maybe it can be one of your more exclusive conferences.
We do workshops in all different sizes.
Wonderful.
To
At St. Kitts, we have 7,000 square feet of the most modern conference space in the Caribbean. Frequently, the hotel is bought out by some very large US biotech and hedge fund companies. And you know, surprisingly, even in this market, we're still receiving inquiries for conferences towards the end of the year and early next year. And I really hope to announce in a couple of weeks our reopening strategy after COVID. So, you know, I just need to clear that with the relevant governments. But we definitely hope that we'll be reopening sooner rather than later. So just bear with me on that, and I'll let you know when both of those icons are reopening.
Fantastic. So for the viewers, stay tuned, and you can also, as I mentioned previously, download information about the Six Senses Resort using the widget. I know that Range Developments, of course, is very active on social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, two of the platforms that you use. So follow Range to get updates on the reopening, as Mohammed just mentioned now. Unfortunately, we have run out of time for today's broadcast. Mohammed, perhaps you have some closing or some closing thoughts going forwards.
Sure. So let me maybe just say a few words about the CBI unit in Grenada, if you don't mind. I think they're doing a fantastic job. Irrespective of the lockdown, they're working very efficiently. Approvals are coming out within the statutory time limit, which is 90 days. They've moved to online submission, and you know, notwithstanding some of the challenges we've had this morning, technology has been working well for the submissions. Mr. Clouden was appointed in, I think it was in July of last year, and you know, we've seen a massive improvement in efficiency during that time. So you know, we're grateful to them because our capital raising ability depends on having an efficient unit. And I think a number of investors and a lot of your members are also grateful to the efforts that the Grenada team are putting in, the Grenada CBI team are putting in, and ensuring that this efficiency is there, learning from best practices, not just from the Caribbean, but elsewhere. So, you know, allow me to deputize from Mr. Clouden with those parting comments.
Thank you very much. You've done a great job, Mohammed. Thanks very much for joining us. I hope the audience at home enjoyed and found today's session interesting. If you're not already a member of the IMC, then please visit our website for more information on joining us. If you already are a member, then visit the site anyway. Lots of news updates and lots of information about virtual events that are taking place all over the world in the next few weeks. We will be back next Wednesday on the 3rd of June. So until then, stay safe. Thanks once again for joining us. Thank you, Mohammed in Dubai. Have a nice evening, and we'll leave you with a short video about the IMC's education and training products.
Thank you, Bruno, for having us, and it's been a pleasure as always to interact with you.
Thank you.
Introducing the Certification in Investment Migration from the Investment Migration Council, the first structured learning product of its kind globally, designed for you. Explore the bite-sized learning pathway of each module on our custom online platform. You can track your progress as you go and learn at a pace that suits you, with an estimated 5 hours of study time per module. The Certification in Investment Migration contributes to the development of professional competencies and standards for those new to or already working in the industry. So, what are you waiting for? Visit our website to start your learning journey today. Introducing the Certification in Investment Migration from the Investment Migration Council, the first structured learning product of its kind globally, designed for you. Explore the bite-sized learning pathway of each module on our custom online platform. You can track your progress as you go and learn at a pace that suits you, with an estimated 5 hours of study time per module. The Certification in Investment Migration contributes to the development of professional competencies and standards for those new to or already working in the industry. So, what are you waiting for? Visit our website to start your learning journey today.